Hello. We are asking schools to collaborate with us as we make evidence-based decisions about grades for each student in each subject across Cambridge IGCSE, O-Level, AS and A-Level and Cambridge Pre-U. I'm Zoe Neville-Smith, Communications Manager at Cambridge International. I'm back with Rachel Bateman, who is our Senior Assessment Advisor, Assessment Standards and Quality. Rachel has joined me today to explore the issue of bias when making professional judgments about students' performance. So Rachel, what do we mean by bias? What is it?
Well, firstly, when we talk about making unbiased judgments, we mean that teachers should be determining predicted grades and rank orders based on students' performance on the subject matter, the content and skills within the syllabus only. Other things which could sometimes even unconsciously affect judgment, which aren't relevant to the syllabus, such as the student's attitude or the student's gender, for example, should not affect the judgment that teachers make. When we talk about being biased, we mean making judgments that are unfairly affected by things that could influence the decisions we make. Whether we're conscious of it or not, it can affect our decisions and could mean that we advantage or disadvantage students. Ultimately, we're all humans making decisions. We need to acknowledge that there are different factors that might influence our judgment and decision making, even without us knowing it. Once we're aware of these factors, we can reflect on the decisions and challenge them professionally to make sure they're fair for our students. As well as considering the things that can affect judgments, teachers can also use data to improve the objectivity of their decision making, and it's good practice to work with and discuss your thoughts with colleagues.
And why is objectivity important in the judgments that teachers are making?
Well, in these unprecedented circumstances, schools are best placed to judge the likely performance of their students if teaching and learning and exams had continued as planned. Schools usually know their students well and will have regularly assessed their performance throughout the duration of the course. But the judgments that schools make must be as objective as possible and based on evidence so that they are fair. We're asking that teachers use all of the information and evidence available to them and reflect with colleagues on the decisions they've made to make sure their judgments are as objective as possible. Objectivity in predicting grades and deciding on rank orders is essential because this will help teachers to fulfil their role in making sure this year's results are as fair as possible. I'm going to be talking about existing research about the way we make decisions to give schools information on how to assess their students as objectively as possible.
So we're asking teachers to make professional judgments in predicting their students' grades and placing them in a rank order. How can they make sure these judgments are as objective as possible?
Well, it is important that a school's predicted grades and rank order judgments are as objective as possible. They should only take account of existing records and available evidence of a student's knowledge, skills and abilities about their performance in the syllabus in question. Each predicted grade should be a holistic professional judgment, balancing different sources of evidence and data, but there should be objective evidence to support the teacher's judgments. It's the evidence that teachers have gathered of a student's performance which should determine their professional judgment about the student's likely performance at the time of the exam. Other factors shouldn't affect this judgment, so including characteristics such as the student's gender, their race, their religion or belief, or a disability. And similarly, judgments should not be affected by a student's behaviour, both good and poor behaviour, their character, their appearance or their social background, or the performance of their siblings.
So there are lots of factors that can have an unconscious effect on a teacher's objectivity. What sort of things do teachers need to be aware of?
Well, it's very easy to have our judgments affected by things that we're not aware of. We're often unconscious of these things. The best response to this is to become aware of these factors, to reflect on them, and to question whether any preconceptions about each student's performance may have affected the decision a teacher has made. Here are some examples of the types of things which can affect our judgment, but sometimes we're not aware of them. I'm using terms from psychology and cognitive science here, but hopefully teachers can start to see how this could apply to their own thinking. So an example of this is confirmation bias, which means having a pre-existing view about a student and only noticing evidence about their performance that fits with or confirms this view. Also, there's something called masking or halo effects, where, for example, you form a particular view about an aspect of a student that hides or overly accentuates their actual knowledge, skills and abilities in other areas. There's also recency effects. So, for example, giving more weight to the most recent interaction with a student or the most recent piece of work done by a student. Instead, teachers should review all of the evidence available to them and make a holistic judgment based on this evidence. There's also something called primacy effects. For example, giving undue weight to first impressions of a student or the first piece of information that you review about a student. Another thing is selective perceptions. So, for example, giving undue weight to a student's performance on a particular part of the content of the syllabus, rather than considering performance across the whole syllabus for any of our qualifications, Cambridge IGCSE, O-level, International AS and A-level, Pre-U and IPQ. There's also something called contrast effects. For example, this might be under or overestimating students' likely performance because you've just considered a large number of students who are all working at a different standard. So to counter this, when a teacher has reviewed a number of students' evidence, they should make sure that they also take time to reflect on the information that we in Cambridge have provided in the syllabus document, in the support materials and past exam papers, for example, on the School Support Hub, to make sure their judgments are not affected by the performance of the other students they've just reviewed.
Earlier on, you mentioned data. Is there any way in which data can be used by a school to identify bias?
Yes, a school can use its previous performance data to review whether there are any effects from different types of bias in their results for previous series. The school can look back at previous years of data. So, for example, over the past 2 to 5 years, if this is available, but contextual information, such as who were the teaching staff at the time, is likely to be really important in making any valid interpretations of whether there are any year-on-year trends to be aware of. So a school could use this historical data to identify whether there might be any indications of a trend of under or over prediction for different groups of students, for example, those from a particular ethnic, social or religious group. So, for example, a school might find it has routinely underestimated forecast grades for Cambridge International A-level maths compared to grades actually achieved for students from a particular group, or that it has routinely overestimated forecast grades for Cambridge GCSE compared to grades actually achieved for students from a particular group. The school could use these findings when checking its proposed predicted grades for June 2020.
And what advice do we have for heads of department or heads of centre?
Well, once you've considered the possible unconscious effects on objectivity that we've talked about, and any information that's available to you from data from previous years, schools can then use this information to inform their reflection on their predicted grades and rank orders before they submit them to us. And heads of department and heads of centre can lead this. But if teachers have identified any potential unconscious bias in their judgments or trends from their examination of that historical performance data, it's also important to make sure that this is not overcompensated for in the predicted grades and rank orders that the teachers are determining. Heads of department, teachers and heads of centres can discuss these findings to support their professional reflection and review of the decisions they've made. Nonetheless, analysing information, reflecting on these provisional decisions, talking with colleagues, as we've been discussing, can help a school to feel sure that it's fulfilled its duties to avoid discrimination, and therefore made sure that it feels its judgments are as objective and fair to their students as possible.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Rachel. I hope this has helped. Thank you for your patience as we've developed and communicated our steps in setting grades for students. If you have any other questions about Cambridge International's response to COVID-19, please visit cambridgeinternational.org/COVID. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Zoe.